A massacre in 1999 left horrifying memories for both the public and the investigative team. The victims were 8 young and beautiful girls living together in a residential complex in Beijing. All 8 girls were very young and beautiful, with the oldest being only 24 years old and the youngest 18, all in the most vibrant years of their youth. The 8 victims were stabbed a total of 120 times, and the scene was thick with a stench of blood, haunting anyone who witnessed it. The strange thing was that the assets and money of the 8 girls were not taken by the murderer. The girls were also not subjected to sexual assault. This information left the police puzzled about the motive. At this point, a series of questions arose. Why did he brutally attack these 8 innocent girls? Could it be that the victims had a grudge against the underworld, leading to their murders? Let's unravel this most intriguing and mysterious case with many exciting details still to come. But first, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to receive notifications whenever there is a new video. This time, the story takes place in Beijing, China. Around 4 a.m. on May 30th, 1999, the Beijing 110 Alarm Center received 2 emergency calls. The first call was from a trembling female voice, speaking nervously and fearfully as if she were being followed or afraid that the murderer would discover her. "Someone wants to kill us. Please come and save us." The female operator at the switchboard heard the panicked tone and immediately tried to stay calm to reassure her. "Who is trying to kill you? Don't worry, please tell me your address." The girl on the other end of the line spoke intermittently, her voice becoming increasingly urgent. "There, a man, he has a knife. He has already stabbed the other sisters in the house. Please, come immediately." The female operator listened tensely, but because the voice was mixed with a local accent and hard to understand, she couldn't fully comprehend everything. She immediately asked again, her voice more urgent. "What did you say? What is your address?" But in response to the operator's question, there were continuous loud, piercing screams from the other end of the line, then suddenly silence as the call was disconnected. The female operator knew that something bad had happened. She immediately contacted the technical staff to trace the caller's phone number, and the results showed that the call came from Shijingshan District, Beijing. Shortly after, the switchboard received a second call. This time, the voice on the other end was a trembling middle-aged female speaking in heavy breaths. "Please come here immediately. A girl just fell right below our house. She's covered in blood, it seems. It seems she's already dead." The female operator immediately understood that this was the crime scene related to the previous call. Without any hesitation, she asked for the specific address. The trembling middle-aged woman replied that it was a residential complex in Shijingshan District. When the police arrived, many people had gathered under the building to observe the crime scene. The police immediately dispersed the crowd to protect the crime scene. As they entered the designated area, a strong smell of blood hit their noses from Gate No. 3, Area 1, Building No. 2, Courtyard No. 23. Since it was the end of May, the weather was hot, and the pungent smell of blood spread throughout the house, making the air at the crime scene stifling and more haunting. The murder scene was so horrifying that any police officer who witnessed it was left stunned and aghast. On the beds in the apartment, there were a total of 7 young girls, all of whom had died. The victims lay motionless amidst pools of red blood scattered everywhere. In addition, dried blood stains on the floor and walls formed a horrifying scene never before seen. While the investigators were carefully examining the scene, another urgent report from local residents made the situation even more serious. On the lower floor, in a truck parked near the building, another body of a girl was discovered. After further investigation, the victims were identified as young women, aged between 18 and 24. They were all sales staff of Fujian Jindeli Handicrafts Co., Ltd., working at shopping centers in Beijing. Notably, one of them was an employee sent by the headquarters to Beijing to train the other girls. The autopsy investigation quickly concluded that all 8 victims were killed between 4 o'clock a.m. and 4:30 a.m. It is noteworthy that there were no signs indicating that the victims were sexually assaulted. However, the scene showed signs of looting, raising the hypothesis that this was a premeditated robbery. Strangely, the perpetrator did not appear to be a professional thief, as he bypassed more than 20,000 yuan in cash carefully wrapped in newspapers under the bed. Faced with these brutal actions, the police force was furious and vowed to apprehend the culprit as soon as possible and punish him severely. This case is considered the most serious mass murder in Beijing since the establishment of the People's Republic of China, shaking the entire city. The Shijingshan police station immediately notified the Beijing Municipal Public Security Bureau, and a team of top criminal experts was dispatched to the scene for an urgent investigation. During the scene examination, the investigation team was horrified by the perpetrator's brutality. Initially, they suspected that the incident might have been caused by a gang, as the wounds on the victims' bodies indicated that the perpetrator had acted with the intent to kill at all costs. However, what horrified the investigators even more was the subsequent autopsy results. Although the girls had died from the initial fatal stab wounds, the murderer mercilessly returned to stab each victim again to ensure that none of them survived. The crime scene was filled with strange traces, leading the investigators to immediately conclude that this was the first time the murderer had acted. No experienced criminal would leave so many obvious clues at the scene. First of all, the footprints at the scene were all blood-stained, indicating that the murderer was a tall man. However, the strange thing is that he was neither barefoot nor wearing shoes, but only wearing socks. Perhaps this murderer thought that wearing socks would help him avoid detection by not leaving shoe marks, or he knew someone was inside the house and wanted to move silently. This detail shows that he had planned the crime in advance, eliminating the possibility that it was a random theft. Next, his actions at the scene prove that he was not a smart killer. He spent too much time in the house, prolonging the crime process because among the 8 girls, one managed to make a phone call for help. Many surrounding neighbors heard the commotion but thought the girls were arguing and did not pay attention. But the surprising thing is that after committing the crime, he did not take any valuable items from the house. The victims' handbags were ransacked, but all 8 phones were still intact and not taken. This further highlights the killer's lack of planning, leaving investigators puzzled about his motive. Moreover, not only was there the blood of the victims at the scene, but there were also bloodstains that did not match any of the 8 girls. After testing, this blood was identified as belonging to the murderer. This proves that he was clumsy during the crime and injured himself. At this point, a series of questions arose. Why did he ruthlessly attack these 8 innocent girls? If he killed for money, why didn't he take any valuable assets? If not for money, then what was his real motive? Why did he choose a densely populated residential area to commit the crime, a place that is easily noticed by many people? Another noteworthy point is that in Beijing's criminal history, there has never been a case as strange as this. According to neighbors, all 8 girls were people who had little contact with the surrounding residents. They usually went to work early in the morning and only returned home late at night. The girls were described by neighbors as polite, gentle, and never causing any trouble or conflicts with anyone. With these characteristics, if the motive was not theft or revenge, it would usually be related to sexual assault. However, none of the 8 victims showed any signs of being coerced. This makes the case even more perplexing and mysterious. The police began to expand the investigation by interrogating all residents living in the apartment building where the massacre occurred. The first family they visited was that of Li Lin, residing in room 203, right next to the rooms of the 8 unfortunate victims. This family consisted of 3 people: Li Lin, her husband Zhao Lianrong, and a child. According to Li Lin's testimony, on the night of the incident, she worked the night shift and only returned home near dawn. Zhao Lianrong stated that he stayed at home taking care of the child and had put the baby to sleep, so he did not hear anything. However, Zhao Lianrong's behavior in front of the police was somewhat unusual, causing the investigators to become suspicious. While the police were interrogating other residents in the building, most of them reacted naturally. Some neighbors reported that around midnight, They heard loud noises and cries for help from the nearby apartment. Some even thought it was just a quarrel between the couple and did not pay much attention. The suspicious part was that Zhao Lianrong claimed he was sleeping very soundly and did not hear anything. This became unreasonable because the apartment was old with poor soundproofing and was right next to apartment 202, making it entirely implausible that he heard nothing. When questioned, Zhao Lianrong replied that it was due to oversight while working. During the investigation, when the police separated Li Lin and Zhao Lianrong for questioning, Li Lin inadvertently revealed an important detail. She stated that on that morning, when she discovered the body on the first floor, she looked up through her apartment window and saw that the lights were still on. This completely contradicted Zhao Lianrong's testimony, who claimed that he slept soundly all night. Clearly, early that morning, Zhao Lianrong had woken up and did something when the murder occurred. The police quickly established a special investigation team to search for more clues and evidence to clarify Zhao Lianrong's motives and actions. When comparing footprints at the scene, they discovered that Zhao Lianrong's footprints matched the bloodstains remaining on the stairs and outside the yard. Despite the clear evidence, Zhao Lianrong stubbornly refused to admit the crime. The case seemed to reach a dead end until June 6, 1999, when the police unexpectedly discovered a new wound on Zhao Lianrong's leg. When interrogated, he could not provide any reasonable explanation for the origin of the wounds. Zhao Lianrong, born in 1962 in Beijing, is a worker employed at a machine tool manufacturing factory. He lives in an old collective housing complex with his wife and their 5-year-old son. His wife, Li Lin, also works at a factory. The family's life is not affluent, but not excessively difficult or deprived. No one could have guessed that someone with a stern, reticent appearance like him would become a serial killer, murdering 8 young girls. Zhao Lianrong himself has no prior criminal record and has never had conflicts or caused trouble with anyone. He only completed middle school education and works as a factory worker, but no one likes him, from colleagues to acquaintances. Everyone noticed that Zhao Lianrong had a scheming and cunning temperament. However, no one could imagine that he would do something so terrible. He once intended to poison the company director's dog. When the gatekeeper caught on, he sprayed insecticide, killing the pet bird that the elderly gatekeeper had kept. He also threw feces and garbage into the gatekeeper's room, removed the director's license plate, and threw it into the women's restroom. After all these misbehaviors by Zhao Lianrong, the entire factory isolated him. No one wanted to associate with such a wicked person. Returning to the results of the scene examination, although shoe prints made identification of the killer difficult, clues could be sought based on the shape and length of the toes. The footprints of this criminal are quite distinctive, with longer than normal big toes. Not everyone has such unusual toes. The police then requested Zhao Lianrong to provide footprints for investigation. He immediately showed uncooperative behavior, intentionally lifting his foot when imprinting. With these suspicious behaviors, the police had sufficient grounds to consider Zhao Lianrong a suspect. He was taken to the police department for a blood test. From that moment, he became withdrawn and didn't say anything when asked by anyone. The test results showed that the unusual blood samples at the scene were indeed those of Zhao Lianrong. He bowed his head and confessed to killing all 8 girls in apartment 202. The process of the crime matched every detail of the investigators' initial assessment. It all began in early summer of 1998, when 8 young girls moved to rent a 3-bedroom apartment next to Zhao Lianrong's family room. Every day, he saw the girls coming and going and was captivated by their beauty. Out of curiosity, he investigated their backgrounds and discovered that the girls were from Fujian, working as shopping guides at a major shopping center in Beijing. Zhao Lianrong observed the girls' balconies from the window of his southeast-facing room and realized that although the balconies were always closed, the windows were often open, even overnight. Recognizing the vulnerability of the girls' apartments, Zhao Lianrong concluded that this was his opportunity to commit the crime. Early on the morning of May 30th, 1999, Zhao Lianrong decided to break into the apartment with the initial intention of theft. He wore gloves, carried a sharp knife, removed his shoes, and gently jumped over the balcony to sneak into the room. Upon entering the apartment, he stabbed 5 young girls who were asleep, including Li Maiki, 24 years old, Zhang Shuijin, 22 years old, Wang Mayu, 18 years old, Wu Shengdan, 20 years old, and Zhu Huijua, 20 years old. After murdering the 5 individuals, he continued into the northern room of the apartment, where Xiao Maifang, 22 years old, was sleeping. Caught by surprise, Xiao Maifang attempted to run downstairs to call for help, but Zhao Lianrong quickly chased her, stabbed her to death, and dragged her body into a nearby truck. Afterwards, he returned to the apartment where he found another girl, Chen Ruihua, 22 years old, attempting to call the police. Without hesitation, he immediately attacked and killed the unfortunate girl. While continuing to search the apartment, he found Zhu Zhuang, 24 years old, hiding in a corner of the room, trembling with fear. He coldly approached and stabbed her until she died. After this horrific massacre, a total of 8 girls were stabbed by him more than 120 times. In a frenzy, he accidentally injured himself without realizing it, leaving his own blood at the scene. Initially, Zhao Lianrong only intended to steal, but the situation spiraled out of control when he stayed at the scene too long, and the girls began to call for help, causing him to fear being discovered. After returning home, he removed his blood-stained gloves and flushed them down the drain, while he threw the murder knife into a nearby river. However, he never expected that his own wife, Li Lin, was the one who called the police that very morning. In his panic, Zhao Lianrong went to the factory the next day, without realizing he was still wearing the blood-stained pair of socks. When the police conducted the examination, they found that the blood on the socks belonged to the 8 victims in apartment number 202. On June 15, 1999, Zhao Lianrong was officially arrested for the murder of 8 neighboring girls. After Zhao Lianrong's crimes were officially confirmed, Beijing police officers began to truly understand the deep-seated motives behind his criminal behavior. It was also at this time that Zhao Lianrong revealed long-standing internal conflicts related to the innocent girls he had targeted. Coming from a humble background, Zhao Lianrong not only felt envy, but was also attracted by the jewelry and handicrafts of the young, beautiful girls. At nearly 40 years old, Zhao still led a monotonous life, with only a basic education and nothing remarkable. When 7 young women moved into the residential complex where his family lived, Zhao began to dream of a different life. Zhao Lianrong started to pay attention to the women, monitoring their every gesture and behavior. He quietly investigated their daily habits, from their work schedules and return home times to details about their jobs and salaries. At this stage, he had no intention of murdering the young women in the neighboring room. Everything changed when the 8th woman appeared. This woman was sent by the main company headquarters to guide and support product management work, an important part of the store's sales plan for the remaining 7 women. In those days, the women began bringing some expensive jewelry and handicrafts back to the residential complex. They did not realize that these very items had awakened the evil nature within Zhao Lianrong. At that time, Zhao silently observed those luxurious items, the expensive bags and jewelry being taken out of the house. That image caused him to fall into a state of stupor. His true nature was also clearly revealed at this point. Tempted, Zhao fell into the dark spiral of crime. Unable to control himself, he killed the women without thinking or considering the consequences. When the police began their investigation, they quickly noticed the oddities of the crime scene. The residential complex is a closed building with limited space, meaning that the perpetrator could not easily escape from everyone's view. The police concluded that an outsider could not have broken into the residential complex at the time of the murder, and the culprit was very likely someone living or working within the area. Additionally, the amount of jewelry stolen in the case had only been brought back by the women in the past few days. Almost no one outside knew about the existence of these items, except for those living near the women or those who happened to see them. This is the reason why the police narrowed down the scope of the investigation and quickly apprehended the cruel murderer. On July 2, 1999, Beijing Intermediate People's Court No. 39 One held a public trial to prosecute the shocking case of Zhao Lianrong. According to the investigation results and testimonies at the court, Zhao Lianrong deliberately took the lives of 8 innocent people through cruel and cold-blooded actions. The court determined that Zhao Lianrong's actions not only constituted the crime of intentional homicide, but also demonstrated contempt for the law and the use of cruel methods to carry out the act. The circumstances of the case were particularly severe, causing immeasurable horror and loss to the victims' families and the community. Zhao Lianrong's actions not only caused pain to the victims' families, but also incited extreme public outrage, demanding appropriate punishment. The court affirmed that this was an extremely serious and unforgivable crime, causing significant harm to social order and security. Therefore, on the same day, the court issued the first instance verdict, sentencing Zhao Lianrong to death. Realizing his own brutality and unforgivable crimes, Zhao Lianrong decided not to appeal. On the morning of July 21, 1999, Zhao was escorted to the courtroom to carry out the execution. The gunshot rang out, ending the life of the murderer and bringing peace to the souls of the 8 innocent girls who had their lives taken in this horrific massacre.